Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to truly live your life until there's nothing left to live, then do we have the One Life We're Given show for you. Today I'll be talking with Mark Nepo, the #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Book of Awakening and a very special, uplifting new book, The One Life We're Given. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about crafting our lives and finding the wisdom that waits in our hearts. That, plus we'll talk about the importance of windows, soul sails and rudders, the great Chinese poet Tues, the importance of Bryant Park, what we can all learn from Grandma Minnie, gotcha, and how to know when we're really scudding along. So welcome back to the show, Mark. Are you ready to shine?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thanks so much. It's great to be back with you.
Great to have you here, and a mighty woohoo! So before we dive right into things, I guess I've got to ask the most important question. What's the importance of a wood shaving?
Well, this book, which is, as you mentioned, The One Life We're Given, I opened it, my father, who was a master woodworker, taught pattern making at Brooklyn Tech High School in New York City for over 30 years. But my father passed away about 3 years ago at the age of 93. And, it's amazing. I'm sure this is common to a lot of folks, but I keep learning more and more, especially now that he's gone, of the things he taught me, the things I don't think he knew he was teaching, and I certainly didn't know I was learning. And it became a metaphor for this book. And yes, there's a beautiful wood shaving that my editor got for the cover, because I opened the book with this remembrance that when I was a little boy, 8 or 9 years old, he taught me how to use a chisel. Mm-hmm. And, and he talked about, the commitment and attention and effort that when you start a stroke with a chisel, you don't stop in mid-stroke. You see it all the way through. Otherwise, you can split the grain of the wood. And, the effort that it takes to do a clean, beautiful stroke, and then that reveals the inner grain on the board you've been chiseling, and then that little wood shaving, which is light as a feather. And I remember he would take that and he'd hold it, and there was something about it that so pleased him. Mm-hmm. And he would just take it and let it go, and we'd watch it float to the basement floor. And all these years later, I understand that as a metaphor for, and much of this book is about the relationship between effort and grace. The effort that's required, the steady effort, not stopping in the middle. And then what that effort does, it reveals that inner grain, and that little shaving, that's the grace. That's the grace. And of course, what I've come to understand is that we are the wood, and life shaves us. Life shaves us to reveal our inner grain, the beauty of our inner grain, and to show us that feather of grace.
So what does it mean to... And thank you for sharing. There's so many directions to go with this, and I hadn't even planned on going there this early, but I'm thinking of the metaphor of stopping halfway through and how you can split the grain if you stop and don't continue.
Well, I think actually, there's another book, a new book that won't be available for another year or year and a half, but I've just been working on it, called "The Temple is the World," and in there I use a quote from Buddha that I hadn't run across before, and I've run across a lot of his quotes, so I was surprised to be able to find something. But he said when starting on the spiritual path, there are only 2 mistakes you can make. One is not to start, and one is not to go all the way through. And it's in that spirit that, we are asked not to do things perfectly, but thoroughly. And so we are asked to be completely present, give our all, and hold nothing back. And so that means, not hesitating to start, but once you start, whatever it might be, to see it all the way through. Which doesn't mean to stubbornly adhere to what I think should happen. Mm-hmm. It means being open to where that effort will take us, because I find 95% 90% of the time, you know, my effort takes me to some place I hadn't imagined. So we're starting to talk about, which the book talks about, a couple of things. One is um, the proper our proper relationship to goals and dreams and ambition. Now, we need to both be and do in the world. We need to be and become. We live in a culture and a time, an age, that is top-heavy. We're so in the doing and in the mental activity, so we have a lot of emphasis on being. But that's because we're out of balance. And in a balanced way, just like you need two legs to walk, you need being and doing. So we do need to be engaged. We do need to have dreams and goals and ambitions to engage us. But I've learned through my life that just because I dream of something, or I see a goal in mind, or I have an ambition, we tend to deify those things, and now they become the God that we strive for, that we serve. And the truth is, at least in my life, that most of the time, those things are just kindling for my heart to come alive. And they often lead me into spaces I couldn't have foreseen. I couldn't possibly have foreseen. And so we need to hold our dreams and goals and ambitions lightly, work toward them, but allow them to bring us into ground we couldn't possibly have seen. So, and this is a metaphor that's in the book early, I feel like I retrieve these things. It's not like I knew these things and then I say, oh, well, let me share them. I discover as I inquire, and the books are the trails of that inquiry. So I don't know where it's going to lead. And this is a good example, this metaphor that became a teacher for me. And it's a metaphor of a simple wooden match, the kind you'd light a fire with. Well, we all know that the flame in the match is dormant in the tip of the match. And it doesn't reveal its light or its heat until you strike that match against a surface. Well, the teacher has been that our gifts are like that match. Our gifts don't reveal their light or warmth until we strike our gifts against the needs of the world. And so I can work and I have a story that's a great example of this. It's a historical character named Tetsugen. Now, Tetsugen, a wonderful name. Tetsugen was a Japanese monk, lived in the 1600s in northwest Japan. And his calling, his dream, his ambition from an early age, the talks of Buddha were not yet translated into Japanese, and he wanted to do the first Japanese translation of the Dharma talks of Buddha. So he worked very hard. He began to translate. He began to beg alms to get money to publish this holy text. He enlisted an artist friend who's, I can't remember his name, but an artist friend who did woodblock carvings and prints, and they were going to publish this beautiful book together. Well, after working on it for 10 years, and they had enough money, at that time where Tetsugen grew up, if there wasn't a flood where he lived, like Katrina for us. And so he said, and he gave all the money to the people where he grew up. And he went back out, continued translating the talks of Buddha, and began to save again. Well, in 8 or 9 years, somewhere else in Japan, there was a famine. And now, having given and his compassion awakened where he grew up, now he said, well, what's the difference between these people, even though I didn't grow up with them, and the people where I grew up? And he said, damn it. I think that was the original Chinese. I'm Japanese, damn it. And he gave all the money away. And so after 25 years, Tetsugen and his artist friend, they finally got more money, and they published the first Japanese translation of the Dharma talks from Buddha into Japanese. And now today, there is an original copy in a museum in Kyoto, and under it there's a plaque that reads, "In his lifetime, Tetsugen published 3 versions of the holy text. Only one is visible."
Goosebumps.
And now, Michael, if the reason we tell this story is because Tetsugen by following what he was working toward, he was led to what he couldn't imagine. He lived the talks of Buddha more than translating them. So what it tells us is that when we have the courage to work with what we're given,
Mm-hmm.
our greatness has a chance to come alive.
Thank you for sharing. How do we go from, and this comes down to grace. I have a list in front of me, 50, 60, 70 questions. It doesn't matter. And it already looks like we're going to get to about 2 of them today. Doesn't matter as well. That's the grace. How do we, in this day and age where we are so top heavy with our goals, with our ambition, with our direction that we, in air quotes here, think is where we're supposed to go, do we allow what I call the 2-step dance, is what you're describing here, that 2-step dance to take place where something greater than ourselves or inside of ourselves, that grace is allowed to shine through?
Well, I think, and again, I don't have answers, but we can compare notes. And from my experience, it's I have always found, and that's why all of my books, including this one, not one of my books has been the book I set out to write.
I like
It's
that.
the book that wanted to be written once I moved through what I thought I was supposed to write. So likewise, I think that we're asked, there's a moment in everything that we engage our full heart in
Mm-hmm.
that comes alive. And that's when we need to listen. That's when I've needed to listen for, okay, now that it's come alive, what do I really see and what am I called to? So, Tetsugen could have been stubborn. He could have been, quote, disciplined. He could have said, well, I feel for those people, but I'm committed to doing this translation and I'm sorry, but this is what I'm supposed to do. And he would have missed his true calling. So if we can hold loosely, if we can give our all,
Mm-hmm.
and hold loosely where we think it's going, but to treat it like a teacher, so that when it comes alive, we say, okay, what is it that you want me to do now? Where is it should I look now? Where is it? And so this brings us back to trust. The word trust literally means to follow your heart. So we follow our heart often when we feel like we've lost our way. But it's just as important to follow our heart when we are in the midst of coming alive,
Mm-hmm.
because that will lead us to what only, it's as if giving our all is the admission ticket to truly hearing and seeing where life is taking us and leading us.
I can't help but go in about a dozen different directions with sailing analogies here. So because I wanted to ask about souls and sails and rudders, about getting out of the harbor, getting into the center of the ocean, and then when you're talking about giving it your all, that's what your dad would have said is really scudding along now.
Yeah. So this is one of the early chapters as I launched this book through the memories of my father, and my father was a very hands-on person, very intelligent person, but a very literal person, a very embodied person. So of course he gets a poet for a son, and I don't know that he would have talked about these things this way, but this is what I've learned from him by unpacking the metaphor of his life and his passions. So he loved sailing. And so from an early age, when he was a kid in Brooklyn, he would skip school and go to Prospect Park.
Mm-hmm.
And at an early age, he built a model sailboat that he would, on a string, sail in the lake in Prospect Park. And as he became, in his 30s, and we were living on Long Island, and in a little home, suburban home, beginning of a development, he started to build a 30-foot sailboat in our backyard, and that's the sailboat that I grew up on. And so I learned from him. One of the things he talked about all the time is that, and the rudder. Before there were steering wheels,
Mm-hmm.
there was a rudder, which was a long, flat piece of wood that would go from the back of the boat way down into the water, and attached to it was a long stick that was called a tiller. And if you pushed that stick to the left, the rudder would go to the right and the boat would go to the right. And likewise, if you pushed it the other way, it would go the other way. So the tiller and the rudder were what steered the boat. But it was the wind filling the sails that took the boat in the direction it would go. And he always told us that. He said that the sails fill and take the boat, and the rudder steers where the sails lead. And it's only all these years later that hearing that, and I've been a student of all paths, that the sail is like our soul that gets filled with the wind of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And our ego, which everybody needs an ego. The problem is when you give the keys to the car to the ego. The ego at its best is a rudder.
Mm-hmm.
It helps steer where the soul, when filled with spirit, leads. And you can try to force the boat to go in one direction, and if you don't follow where the wind is, it will flutter, or it will spill all the wind. It will not go other than where the wind will take it. And so this is a powerful metaphor. I was on a few years ago on the Oprah's tour, Live Your Life tour, and I was asked with a couple of other people, Rob Bell and Elizabeth Gilbert, to do some question and answer sessions for crowds during lunchtime. And it was there that this came to me, because a woman asked me, how do you know the difference between your soul and your ego?
Mm-hmm.
And there I was, and while she asked that, all of a sudden I heard my father, this just came into me, this memory of my father while we're sailing on the Great South Bay, saying this about the sail and the rudder. And so the other lesson that example I have is, both my brother and I have this beautiful memory. My father would love to get the sailboat close hauled, which means it's filled with as much wind as possible, without too much. If you get too much, then it's a big enough boat, it's not going to tip over, it'll just spill the wind from the sail. But when it's going at close hauled, then the boat kind of heels over, and the lower rail, the leeward rail, kind of scuds near the edge of the water, and the water comes in through the rail, and it's an exhilarating moment. And we're on the other side, the high side of the boat, and my father loved that. And my brother and I, have memories of him that in that moment he was so thoroughly himself and so thoroughly happy that he was actually living all time in that one moment. And it became an example, especially now since he's gone. It's become a real example to me that when we can give ourselves completely to whatever love calls us to, we have the opportunity, the chance, and this is where effort leads to grace. We have the chance to live in that one moment, lived fully, all of time. All of time.
It's such a precious moment. I have a word for that moment because I grew up sailing myself.
Oh, you did? Oh, you
Yes.
know this well. Yeah.
Yeehaw! The
Yeah,
water is coming up on the edge. You've got it right to the limit, and you feel like you're flying. It is so exhilarating.
it is. And you feel at one, like there's nothing between you, the boat, and the water.
Mhm.
It's all one for that moment.
So, can you tell us from there? Can you fast forward a little bit and tell us about Grandma Minnie?
No, yeah, well, that was my father's father, and my grandmother, Grandma Minnie, who came from Russia at the turn of, like 1912, 10, 11, around there. And man, she was more of a mother to me than my mother. I loved her dearly, and she so um, supported me. And these moments, whoever's listening to us, I believe we all have a personal mythology. So let me start there before talking about Grandma,
Sure.
because she's part of my personal mythology. But let me give that context, because we all have a personal mythology. Myth really began as a way to help us keep in view what's hard to keep in view. And some of the myths that we know from hundreds of years ago, centuries ago, they're so profound that the details have kind of fallen off, and we just know the basic mythic story. But they all started, I think, as very personal myths. And we have a constellation in each of our lives
Mhm.
of stories that we can return to that will help be a foundation for us, that will keep in view what's hard to keep in view. And if we think about them, recognize them, honor them. And the word honor literally means, it's one of my favorite words, and its meaning is so clear. The word honor means to keep what is true in view.
I love that.
Isn't that fabulous? To keep, so if we're friends and I honor you, I keep what I know to be true about you in view, especially when you can't keep it in view. So, so all of this to say that if whoever is watching us or listening, or I encourage you to try to locate one personal myth, one story, foundational story in your life that helps you helps you keep what is true in view. Now, for me, so this gives a context. My grandmother, there were several things there. But one of the foundational stories in my life goes back to when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I would stay with her in Brooklyn. My father would drive me in, and I'd stay 3, 4 days with her, which I loved. I just loved. And she lived in one apartment in a 4 apartment brick building, and over near Bay Parkway, and in the basement, I was wandering in the basement while she was cooking upstairs, and I found what turned out to be my grandfather's Talmud that he brought from Russia.
Wow.
Now, I didn't know what it was then, but I was mesmerized by this book and these strange language, these beautiful letters. I had no idea what they meant, and it was so worn, Michael, that I have it right here. I have it. And because we're on Skype, I can show it to you. Uh,
Wow.
and so look at that, and
That is.
look at the cover. Look at
Well, the cover is separate at this point. It can open from either side, you could say.
the cover is it's like an artifact. It's like an artifact, and my grandfather's hands print is worn into the book. And so, when I was 8 or 9, I found that, and my grandmother sensed something and came down and was moved, of course, that I was going through his things, and he had been gone now. He had passed away, um, and so she sat me between her legs with her apron. I had her apron on, um, and she looked at me and she said, whispered more firmly than I'd heard anyone ever whisper. She said, "You are why we came to country." She said, "You are why I live." And she said, and I was holding this tentatively, that book, and she gripped my hands to it. And she took my hands and she said, "These are the oldest things you own." And then with tears in her eyes, she waddled back up the stairs to the kitchen, and I hid that book behind a secret shelf. And it was only years later that I came back and got it as an adult. But you know what she did for me is she was the first one to, and I grew up in a, dysfunctional household with a lot of criticism and anger and expectation, but she was the first one to say to me, "You are enough as you are. You don't have to do anything. You are. You are." And so that's become a foundational story for me and part of my personal mythology.
There is and I was talking to with you about this before the interview, that your book, if we can use the word personify to give it a persona, I guess we can, personifies kindness and compassion. It's something since we first met I've felt about you. I have an expression that I tend to teach people whether I want to or not. It just comes out of me. Kind, gentle, easy, good. That I want
Yeah.
everything in life, that sweetness, to be kind, gentle, easy, good. It doesn't mean the lessons don't come without challenges, because without challenges we don't tend to learn. But I want them kind, gentle, easy, good. And I think I can hear in your writing here the sweetness that your grandma Minnie brought to everything.
Yeah, thank you. It's very touching. I appreciate that. Well, again, I think all of us have some version of this, but we have to be still enough to retrieve it. And then once we know what is true, we can honor it. It will help us be in touch with our foundation when things are tough, you know. So this brings us to a metaphor about, again, water, a water metaphor. But if we look at the sea, if we look at the ocean, we're accustomed to seeing the top, and we're accustomed to seeing waves, and we see the weather disturb and make the waves choppy or smooth or with little white caps or ripples or whatever. When we look at that, we really can't, when we go down, you can't tell where one wave ends and the depth begins. It's all one water. If we stay only in the top 6 inches, we're going to get battered around by the weather of life, the weather of circumstance. When we can drop down into the depth, you can't avoid, because it's all one water, you can't avoid the top, what's happening at the top. But it has, because of the depth of being, it's received more gently. And this isn't a metaphor for our inwardness, because the depth is the depth of our being. And the surface 6 or 8 inches is our psychology. But it's all one water. You can't tell where your mind and thoughts and emotions stop and your depth of being begins. We are asked to inhabit both.
Thank you for sharing on that. Going along this ocean analogy, I was fascinated, and on my Facebook page, I didn't even realize it till recently, is a picture of me meditating in front of rocks, standing, jutting out of the water on the edge of Monterey. And you share a beautiful story about all of these animals
Yes,
up on
yes.
these rocks. And there's a quote that I love associated. Maybe you bring us home with this piece or about this story. When we're too exhausted to uphold our differences, there's room enough for everyone.
Yeah, that was the teaching. Everything is a teacher. And I'll talk about that. I'll tell that story in a second. But, in the Hindu tradition, there's a term, upa guru, which means the teacher that is next to you at this moment. And that was the teacher that was next to me. I was driving down US 1 the first time along that beautiful, majestic highway along the Pacific. And I was right there in Monterey. And I was stopped because, as you know, there are there are these little outcroppings, these little stone islands that maybe are half a mile out or 300 yards out. They just pop up, and the water is pretty rough there because it's coming in
Oh,
off
yeah.
the Pacific. There's more cliffs than there are beaches, and so there I was this day, and I was stopped because on this one outcropping, uh, it was completely covered with wildlife. There weren't any spaces of stone you could see. It was covered with cormorants and sea lions and pelicans and otters and everything you could imagine. They were even laying on top of each other. And I stopped and watched this. I pulled the car over and I watched this. And the Upaguru, the teacher of that moment,
Hmm.
was showing me this profound insight that normally those different forms of wildlife would be territorial. Normally, they would be competitive, or you might see some of the pelicans on one part of the stone and the sea lions on another, kind of saying, "Hey, don't get in my space." But because it was a rough day and they were exhausted of their differences, there was room enough for everyone. They literally were sleeping on top of each other. And this is something that's very relevant for our time right now. We need to be exhausted of our differences to remember that there's room enough for everyone. Room enough for everyone, which leads me, I'd like to just touch in for a moment and talk about the time we find ourselves in. I feel like as divided as we are as a country, and we are very polarized, you know, um, there is no they. We
Thank
are
you.
they. We are they. And so it's made me think about this, and I react on several levels. On one level, being a person in this time, being of Jewish heritage, having had, my grandmother's sister and her family died in Treblinka, seeing the kinds of fear that led to Hitler being in power. So I feel like we have to be very vigilant that if we are entering a fearful dark time, in the Middle Ages, it was the monks
Hmm.
who kept literacy alive in the Dark Ages when most of the people couldn't read or write. Well, all the things that we're doing, the things that you're doing with your show, the things that we care about, they matter more than ever because we are being asked to keep the literacy of the heart alive through this turbulent time. In addition to, however, we are asked in particular to participate, to protest, to be present, to not be silent. And on a deeper level, as I've been thinking about all this, I want to offer this, which I'm working on. I haven't yet finished, but it's this notion that, you know, in the beginning, I imagine when human beings first came upon each other in caves, there were two responses. Imagine the first person coming upon a cave and finding another one in there, and they'd never seen anyone else before. And one person said, "Oh, you're different. Go away." And the other person said, "Oh, you're different. You're not like me. Come, teach me what I don't know." And I think that there have been two tribes throughout all of humanity, and the go away tribe and the come teach me tribe. And we are members of both. We can switch membership in a day depending on the level of our fear. And I think that, I'm coming to believe that, the go away tribe is based on enough fear, starts to think, well, how can I be sure that they've gone away? So based on more and more fear, we have to
Hmm.
make sure they go away. And now we start persecuting people, and we start hurting people, and we start exiling people. An extreme, extreme, ugly metastasis of this idea, we have genocides. The only way we can be sure that those people go away who are different is if we kill them, if we get rid of them. On the other side, and Plato had said, we are born whole, but we need each other to be complete.
Mhm.
So this is part of the Come Teach Me tribe that says, oh, thank God, something other than me. Together we will learn it all. Come, show me what I don't learn, and I'll show you what you don't know because I'm different than you. Let us come together. And so all the periods of enlightenment throughout history have been the extreme manifestation of the Come Teach Me tribe. Come, come, oh, let's listen to each other. And it's this mystical fact that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Now, it's interesting that in our age, we, in our country, we throughout our history have moved from periods of isolation to inclusion.
Mhm.
And this is moving from one tribe to the other, but I feel we need to be committed to returning to the Come Teach Me tribe.
In a time where we're so polarized, how do we move past the fear of oh my God, look at what they, whoever they is, whichever side that you choose to take in this story, look at what they are doing. How do we realize the they is us? And then to say, no matter what, here, let me pull out my cup. First off, let me offer some to you, but let me pour out my cup so that I have the room for you to come teach me.
Well, that's beautiful what you just said. You have to. That's the first thing. We have to empty ourselves of our assumptions and conclusions, which is not easy. But I think this is the role of suffering and compassion, because it's through suffering, and I'm not advocating suffering. It's like gravity. You can't avoid it. You don't have to go out looking for it. Okay, believe me, you know.
Yes.
But what suffering does is when I fall down, now I have compassion whenever I see someone fall down.
Mm-hmm.
When I was young and I was impatient watching an old woman uh, tenderly, so slowly go through the grocery line because of her back and see quietly feeling impatient. Well, in all those years since, when I've had, my back is fine, but you know how you throw your back out, you can do something.
Mm-hmm.
No, so after I've done that, no, now I'm not impatient. Now I go and help her because that's what it does. Compassion. So it's through compassion that we remember that we are each other. And the other thing that I would offer, which I think is such an important, this came from a student of mine who was a very wise woman, uh, someone who journeyed with a group I taught a few years ago. She's in her 70s, and she had this amazing, and this is perfect for what we're talking about. So at this stage of life, she has a cousin who who became very kind of evangelical, fundamentalist Christian. And now that many of their relatives are gone, they grew up together as kids, and now her cousin has reached back to her and
Mm-hmm.
said, "Gee, let's spend more time together. We're the only ones left." And she told this to our group and said, "I don't know where this came from in me, but I said to him, I would love that as long as we share our experience and not our conclusions." And that's profound wisdom for our times. So we get angry and we get polarized. And this is not to minimize. We may believe different things.
Mm-hmm.
But the only way we're going to touch each other is through the compassion that comes out of suffering and the inquiry that comes from, well, don't tell me what you believe. Tell me how you came to believe what you believe. What made you the way you are? That's what I want to know. And then I can share that with you. And that's how we start to connect and realize we are each other.
I like that so much, Mark, because people don't tend to like others preaching to them. However, if you share your story, no one can ever argue with your story. It's just your story.
Yeah. And there's another, this is going to be in another book that I'm working on that will come out next year about moments of community and how they work. And I've looked for stories throughout history. And this is a profound, this is a little known story that's in Gandhi's life that Gandhi's not the center of, that he
Mhm.
supported. And in 1924, in Viacom, India, and this has to do with the caste system. So the untouchables, the lowest caste in the Hindu society, were treated like lepers. They were not, and the highest caste, the Brahmins, the priest caste, you know. So in Viacom, as in many places in India, the the untouchables were not allowed to walk down the road past the temple where the Brahmins lived. They had to walk miles out of the way to go to where they lived because they weren't allowed to do that. And at this time in 1924, there was a protest where several untouchables and other Hindus, to support them, purposely walked past the temple, the Brahmin temple in Viacom, India. They were beaten, they were arrested, and they were sentenced to 10 years in jail.
Wow.
And unexpectedly, thousands of people from out India. This has nothing to do with the British. This is all Hindu, within Hindu society. They all came to protest this. And the Maharishi who led this province in India got all of his army and his military, and they built a barricade in front of the temple. And they sat there, the protesters facing the police, looking at each other. And we remarkably, the protests we have, which are amazing, what's happened in the last few weeks. Well, this protest went on for months, until the protesters staring at the police for so long they forgot who was on whose side and what they were there for. And in the heat and in the hunger and the thirst, they would reach across and offer each other bread and water, because they knew they were there, but they weren't sure whose side they were on anymore. They were just on each other's side. And the conclusion of that amazing story, and Gandhi was not at the center of this. He supported it, but he said, you need to do this, and I will support you, but I can't be at the head of this. And so finally, this is remarkable, after 16 months,
Wow.
the Brahmins came out and came to the protesters, who were now down to several hundred, because life happens, and many of those thousands had to go back to work, or someone died and they had to go take care of someone, or they had to feed someone. But the hundreds that were left, the priests came and said to them, "We can resist your prayers no longer. You are welcome to pass."
Woohoo!
And two things that are so profound about that is that in order for us to understand at a heart level that we are each other, it takes time. This couldn't have happened in the first month of this protest.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time to recognize that we are each other. And the second is, how come we aren't taught this in school? Why isn't this a story that is taught in school? How come I have to be, in my 50s and 60s and find it like a needle in a haystack in the backyard of history? So, this is where we need to honor. What I'm trying to do with this is to honor and keep what is true in view by telling this story, bringing it back to light.
We have, when you ask that question about our educational system, at least here in the West, it's very binary. There's a winner and there's a loser to every game, like the Super Bowl that just took place. There's
Yeah.
no in between. I knew my days as a professional cyclist were numbered when I showed up at the start line and I wanted to give everybody a hug. I saw
That's
us all as one. That is fatal to your career as Ricky Racer.
that's fabulous. That's fabulous. Yeah. I think that's true, and I think that's what life this goes back to what we talked about earlier in terms of our goals and ambitions and dreams. It's fine to prepare to win and train to win, but in that preparation, we are open to the deeper journey of life. So, another this is a story of two monks who study long, hard years, and they finally begin a climb of a mountain where on the top they are going to keep an appointment with Buddha or God, whatever tradition. This could be told in any tradition. And halfway up the mountain, one of them breaks his leg. And so they stay the night. The other one takes care of him. And in the morning, it's clear that the one who broke his leg isn't doing well. He's got a fever. And it's not as simple as just leaving him and keeping your appointment with Buddha on the top of the mountain. And so now we stop this story, and the question is, what would we do? Would we keep our appointment with God or Buddha on top of the mountain, or would we care for our other who has a fever and broke his leg? And what I've come to understand is that every day we face this choice. And whatever you think is on the top of the mountain, whether it's money, happiness, success, winning, God, national security, whatever you think it is, when we have more people that will keep that appointment than care for those who are in front of us, we have an age of cruelty. When there are more people who will stay and realize that the summit is where we stop and love each other, we have an age of compassion. And every day we're asked to choose. And that couldn't be more important than right now.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as someone who has been there on the side of the mountain, broken, waiting for help to get there, I know that helping that other person, that is your appointment with God.
That's it. That is it. Absolutely. And I think we don't discover that until we fall down and get up, and until we realize that this again, there's nothing wrong with working toward things. But then when we discover, when those stories unravel, the story of winning unravels to the story of love, that's when we discover that we are each other.
Woohoo! Fast forwarding towards very close to the end of the book, and everybody go out and get this book. It is the stories that he tells, he's just scratching the surface of what you're going to get in here.
Thank you.
You say that we want to keep our hearts open a little bit longer when we feel we have nothing left to give.
Yeah. Well, I have found, again, in my experience, that this is a paradox, that, our heart is so sensitive that when we're going through things can feel unbearable. But that level of sensitivity means that the heart's actually working, that it's actually a fine-tuned instrument. And so, while things can feel unbearable, we are very close to what is unbreakable in us. And when we can hold open, when we think we have nothing left to give, I have always been surprised at how much is there and the pureness of what I have to give that comes out when I try to give anyway. When I try to give anyway. And when we're doing that, when we can, and this takes a quiet courage, then, we are living the one life we're given. And like that match, the wisdom that waits in our heart is dormant. It's there. But it takes us giving and holding nothing back and caring for those in front of us to bring it alive and reveal it, to let that wisdom out and to let life in.
Woo! You talk about, speaking about the match and burning, and I'm thinking of a wick. Toward the end of the book, you're talking about the goal of life, and you say it's to have nothing essential left by the time it leaves its body, the way a flame uses up its wick.
Yeah, I think, this is, we're taught, and in the surface world, there's nothing wrong with prudence and saving and thinking about retirement and how to make it through the world, negotiate the world of circumstance. That's about surviving. What I'm talking about is thriving. And if we don't thrive, there's no point in surviving. There's no point. We become the walking dead. And so I think that when we can be committed to holding nothing back and giving our all, we will beautifully be used up by the time our soul leaves our body. And what more could we ask? What more could we ask of a life on earth?
I love it. So I want to double back as we start to wrap things up, and we'll do a beautiful little poem meditation at the end. But since we are going kind of this current events direction and theme today, it's so important for people. How are you personally staying in a positive place with all that you're seeing going on right now?
Well, I think I would say that what's important is to stay in an authentic place and not try to struggle for it to be positive versus negative. That all things are true, all things aren't fair, but all things contain truth, and only the heart can integrate and absorb that. And so what I'm trying to do is at once in the world that is full of circumstance, I feel we're being asked to participate and not be invisible.
Yeah.
And what that means for everyone, it might mean for someone to go to a protest. It might mean to sign a petition. It might mean, teaching and writing in a little different way. It means letting what is true through all the time. And in a deeper way, as we've been talking, how can I contribute to keeping the literacy of the heart alive? How can I light that match of my gifts? How can I water the seeds of decency? How can I keep, and that may mean that could be, by doing something extraordinary like Tetsugen that we talked about, and it might be doing something quietly extraordinary like helping the old woman with her groceries to the car. It all matters. And our job, I think, and especially at this time, all the things that we care about are not, and that we value are not luxuries. They are essential. And we need to participate in decency and the literacy of the heart to keep it strong and alive.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. What words of wisdom would you give parents, maybe specifically now, for their kids?
I would offer, and I say this humbly because I'm not a parent, so but I would offer to young people, for young people or parents or to people, to not hide the truth of what's going on, to point out the difference between fear, between the go away tribe and the come teach me tribe, and that we all have a choice every day of which we will be, to point up examples of cruelty and of kindness, and to say, where do you feel most alive? Where do you want to be? What do you want to do? How do you want to participate? You are entering this world. You will enter this world, no matter how old you are. What do you want? What part do you want to be in? Will you push to the top of the mountain, or will you stop and love whoever you meet along the way?
Woohoo! On that note, and I'm loving this interview, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I do call the woohoo factor?
Oh, well, it's conversations like this. It's, I love being with folks and journeying with folks in the teaching that I do. And maybe I should mention here, in the coming up, I'm on sabbatical now, but March I'll be back out on the road, and I love that so much. And so in March 3rd and 4th, I'll be doing a Friday, Saturday workshop in New York City at ABC. which is on Union Square. You can find details about this on my website, marknepo.com. And in April 7 through 9, I'll be in Southern California at a wonderful retreat center, Pine Manor, which is in Lake Elsinore, in Southern California, Lake Elsinore. So I hope folks can join me. I love that. I love the space of conversations like this, and I love the quiet of, my wife's a potter, and she's working out in her studio as we're having this conversation, and our yellow lab Zuzu is with her. I love that dog too.
Does she know when she's potting on the wheel what's going to come out?
No. That's another great metaphor, a great example is she has to work with the clay to see what shape presents itself. It is all co-creation. So yeah, do you want me to?
Yeah, let's do that. Before that, two last things. First off, the website one more time.
Oh, it's there's actually two websites,
Yep.
marknepo.com and 3intentions.com, spelled out, the number 3 intentions, all one word.
Mm-hmm.
And either of those will have where I'll be all throughout the coming year, and lots of things about my books and teaching and stuff.
Beautiful. Before we dive into your poem, any last words of wisdom you want to share with people today?
Oh, just to encourage us all not to be afraid of listening to our heart and engaging our heart. D.H. Lawrence has a poem about self-protection where he raises the issue in the question, is self-protection hiding who you are or being who you are? And he concludes, being who you are. Being who you are. And that involves trusting your heart and where it goes, and that it is the strongest muscle we have.
Woohoo! To bring you full circle. Ooh, I didn't even know I was going to go full circle. If I understand this right, you cannot balance the clay on the wheel with your head.
Yeah, with your heart. You have to, this is centering. All potters, I've learned this from watching my wife, who's done this for years now, but when she started, all potters have to learn how to center the clay on the wheel. You put a lump of clay on the center of the wheel spins, and your hands have to guide it till it starts to shape itself. Now, in the beginning, all potters, they try to control the clay and push it one way or another. And inevitably, that clay collapses, it spins off, it splats on the wall, it goes all over you. And only eventually, when you start to follow the clay, and the clay then follows you, and you start to work with the clay through your hands, not the force of your will, does the clay start to rise on the moving wheel into a form.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, on that note, do you have a beautiful poem you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, and I'll use this as a guided meditation on the way out here. And thank you, Michael. This has been a wonderful conversation together. And so what I'll do is I'm going to leave a pause between each stanza.
Mm-hmm.
It's called To Be and Belong. Let go your want for greatness and feel the tool that's in your hand. Let go your fear of emptiness and receive the wave still reaching from the beginning. That wave only wants to enliven you the way water refreshes every hole. So let the web of things entangle you. Only stars are free, and they are so lonely. Curse what you will, but give thanks that everything alive wants something from you. Curse what you will, but give thanks that everything alive wants something from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. This has been truly, truly special. I've loved this time we're spending together, and I love what you're sharing with people, because I think that kindness, that sweetness, that openness, that it's courageous to be open today. It's so needed.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for your work. I'm glad to be a part of your good work.
Thank you so much. All right, got to crank it up for the finish here. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the one life we're given, and squeeze all the life out of it you can, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Mark.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a joy. It's a joy, really.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!